Well, hello confirmands, I hope you are well. This is the confirmation lesson that is scheduled for January 31st, 2024. It is lesson 16. We are continuing our trek through the small catechism. Remember, there's a large catechism too. It wouldn't hurt you a bit to read the large catechism. You can get it online for free if you want one and you want it in book form. I suppose I could buy you one. But the deal would be that you actually have to read it, and I would follow up with you on it, but I'm happy to do that. Books are important. This is the fourth petition that we're doing today. The fourth petition is, give us today our daily bread. Remember, petition means request. That it's a word that is relatively rare in our current American usage. People will petition the government, ask the government for something. They can petition a court, asking the court for something. But outside of those two things, most of it has fallen into, would you sign this petition? Which is still connected, right? You're asking for something, and the force of all the signatures is supposed to give that request weight. But for most people, a petition now is a piece of paper on a clipboard that you may or may not want to sign. That ain't it, right? The petition that we're talking about here, and really that we're talking about there, is to request from someone. And so we are on our fourth petition. Remember, as we go through the Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven, this is the introduction, who we're talking to, our Heavenly Father. Hallowed be your name, that God's name would be holy in us and through us, that God's kingdom would come. Again, God's kingdom is going to come whether we want it to or not, but we're asking that it would come to us and through us, right? And then your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So, again, these are monstrously huge requests that we're making of God. And the only reason that we have the boldness to ask them is because Jesus commands it. But it really is like asking, if Grandma says, what do you want for Christmas? It really is like asking for a lake home and a Lamborghini. That these are huge requests, right? That God would be honored in how we live. That God's kingdom would come through us. And that we would live and talk in such a way that we begin to create a beachhead of the kingdom of God here in the world, and that soon, through us, by the power of God and God's grace, the world would resemble heaven in its obedience to God and its order before God. So, monstrous requests. And if there's not part of you that your throat clenches up a little bit and your heart beats a little fast when you're praying the Lord's Prayer, then you have forgotten what it is you're praying, and you need to go back and think. Remember, Luther says that we should spend a lifetime in the small catechism, right? Because we're dumb, and we forget, all of us, from top to bottom. And pretty soon, again, the Lord's Prayer just becomes this thing that we recite while we're thinking about something else, or even worse, it just becomes a string of vowels. Our Father, hallowed be your name, will be done on earth as in heaven. Right? We've all been there. But it should not be, and part of what we're doing this year is making sure at least you understand the gravity and the magnificence of the prayer and the things that you're daring to ask God. So that's our review. A couple quick announcements. We again, sadly, must stress that people should put their names on papers. Do you have this trouble at school? It's astonishing to me. Some of you are so dedicated to rolling your papers up in tubes or folding them 72 times that you're forgetting to put your names on them. But please, let's just hand in normal flat papers with names on them and see how that works. We continue to be in the season of Epiphany. It is the third season of the church year after Advent and Christmas. Epiphany is a season of varying lengths. It depends on when Easter comes, when Lent comes. Lent is connected to Easter, so you work backwards from Easter and then Lent. The colors are white at the beginning. There's this explosion of light in the star that guides the Magi to Jesus. And then the color shifts to green partway through, talking about the unfolding. You've all had plants. Remember in kindergarten when you planted the bean seeds and you got the little shoot and then the leaves come out, right? So as you and I go through Epiphany, we're supposed to be seeing more and more of the revelation of Jesus. And then for Transfiguration Sunday when Jesus is altered on the mountain with Peter, James, and John. I think we're back to white there. Again, it's an explosion of light and power that ends the season of Epiphany. Okay, the first 4 words of the phrase that pays this week: the kingdom that Jesus. The kingdom that Jesus. So you're 4 words in, 4 words total. There we go. Okay, so the 4th petition. And again, I hope you've printed this sheet and you're looking at it with me, because the rest of this whole page is Martin Luther preaching. Okay? The 4th petition. Give us today our daily bread. What is this? What does this mean? In fact, God gives daily bread without our prayer, even to all evil people. But we ask in this prayer that God cause us to recognize what our daily bread is and to receive it with thanksgiving. Right? So someone, now we're off Luther, we're back to me. At the Wednesday night gathering, someone asked, does God bless, even people who don't believe in him? Yeah, with hundreds of thousands of blessings, more blessings than they can count. That God loves all of God's children, the good and the evil, the righteous and the unrighteous, those who know their way and those who are ignorant, and God pours out God's grace on them every day without fail, because that's who God is. And if you forget that about God, then very quickly you're going to be worshiping and praying to an idol. Right? You're going to replace that with some construct in your head, that God blesses you because you're good, or God punishes that guy because he's particularly wicked. God pours out grace on all God's children every day. So, and God's going to keep doing it, whether you pray it or not, because that's who God is, right? Your parents, correct me if I'm wrong, they give you a place to sleep, and they give you clothes, and they give you food, even when you're being kind of a butthead, even when you're being ungrateful, even when your eyes are in danger of rolling right out of your head. Your parents may get mad, they may get frustrated, they may take your phone away, but they continue to give you all kinds of blessings. So when we pray this, give us today our daily bread, we're asking that God helps us recognize what our daily bread is, right? And that we would receive it with thanksgiving, right? We're not asking God to make something happen that God wouldn't do without our asking. It's really important that you get that straight. Right? When you pray for your daily bread, it's not like God is going, should I or shouldn't I? All right, she asked, I will. Right? No. Just like your parents take care of you, right? You should see all that your parents do, and you won't until you have kids of your own, right? I guarantee that. You won't have the slightest idea until you are up all night with a kid barfing on you, right? And then you have to, call in sick to work, and the project that you're working on that's due is not going to get done. You have no idea. And I say that with respect. I didn't either. No one does. Okay? But, your parents aren't waiting for you to decide whether or not they're going to pour out their lives for you on your behalf. They are going to pour out their lives for you on your behalf. But it would do you a world of good to start seeing all that they're doing. It would do you a world of good to grow in thanksgiving for what they're doing. And this is what we're praying in this prayer, that we would recognize all that God's done and that we would grow in thanksgiving. So back to Luther. What then does daily bread mean? Everything included in the necessities and nourishment for our bodies. So daily bread is everything that your body needs. And then Luther gives you a list, such as food, drink, clothing, shoes, house, farm, fields, livestock, money, property, an upright spouse, upright children, upright members of your household, upright and faithful rulers, good government, good weather, peace, health, decency, honor, good friends, faithful neighbors, and the like. Everything you need is daily bread. And when you pray for daily bread, right, God's already at work giving you these things, but God wants you to see that all of these things are from God's hand. And God wants you to start growing in gratitude for them. All right? Next 4 words of the phrase that pays. Preached and lived was. Preached and lived was. So that's 4 more words. You should be up to 8 words total. Take a minute, count them. Good. All right? So turn the page. And again, this is not going to be a terribly long video. It's a huge idea. But it doesn't take us long to describe it. Right? You're smart. If you pay attention, you'll get it. So daily bread is everything that we need to live. Right? Everything. Air, oxygen, everything. Water, everything. You take any bit of it away, and we suffer. Right? If you don't have faithful and upright leaders in a country, things go bad. Right? We know this. Right? So, you take anything off the list, and things go bad. Take more things off the list, and we're in danger of not being able to live. Right? You have neighbors that are inclined to violence. You have bad law enforcement. You have tainted water. Life becomes really, really hard, really tenuous. Right? And you take any more things away, and we die. Just that simple. Right? Of course, there's stuff on the list that you take that thing away and you die. You take food away, you die. You take water away, you die. You take air away, you die. And maybe it takes longer for you to notice the tragedy of losing whales, right? That you don't see how whales are connected to you. You don't understand the chain of life and ecosystems, and that's a tenuous connection, right? Species have gone extinct, and other species have figured out how to adapt to it. But you lose a few things that seem unimportant, and there can be a cascading effect, and you can think about that and talk about that. But you take away any number of things from this list that Luther gives us, and life becomes impossible. These are all of the things that God has given us that we don't even think about from day to day. And of course, there's the whole other list that God's given, that doesn't imperil your life, but color, beauty, music. God gives those things too. They're not technically daily bread, right? They're not necessities, but they're another example of God pouring out blessings on people, whether they deserve it or not. Wicked people can enjoy music. Wicked people can compose music that brings joy and beauty into the world for everyone else. That's kind of a strange and wondrous thing. That's all from God's hand. Right? So God gives it to the just and to the wicked. God gives it to animals, right, who don't have the capacity for gratitude. Some animals do. Dogs, yes. Cats, But God gives the daily bread to animals. And again, this will help you understand, because animals are not asking for it. God just gives it to them. Now, there's a great thing here that we should remember, right? That if you're thinking, well, then I don't need to work. I don't need to try, right? I don't need to earn money to buy food. I don't need to be a good citizen. I don't need to insist that I have honorable and trustworthy leaders in government. I don't need to insist that government operates as it's supposed to operate within the confines of whatever constitution is supposed to govern it. I don't need to do anything of those things, because God's just going to give me everything, right? So one of Luther's students asked him about that. And Luther said, God feeds the birds down to the very smallest every day. But you'll notice he does not throw the food into the nest. That they have to go get it. Right? And so you and I, there's this thing, we're supposed to be aware of all this God gives. We're supposed to be grateful for all God gives. And we're supposed to, in gratitude, get up and do the work that makes sure that our neighbor gets it too. That you have the great high honor of being the hands and the mouth of God. And that as you work for these things, as you work for clean air and clean water, good government, good neighbors, right? Food, shoes, clothing, you have the list. You can look at it. You should memorize it, right? But as you work for that, to make sure that your neighbor can have it too, your children can have it too, you are doing the will of God. So there's just everything you look at here gets bigger the more you look at it. This little give us today our daily bread, right? It grows as you examine it. Okay, so God gives, everything to the just and the wicked, to animals, to all that live, down to the very smallest little, single-celled organisms. God's making the world hum, for them too. But that doesn't mean that you and I can just sit. We're supposed to be at work doing these things. Okay, so we're asking in this petition, in this prayer, that God would help us to remember that every breath and every bite and every scrap of sanity and every little bit of peace comes from God's outstretched hands, right? At your house, right? One of the things that I told my kids and still tell the child that I have living at home, is you don't have any money, right? That when they were little, they would talk about how they had money. No, it all passed through my hands, right? The money that you got from grandma, right? It's connected to my family line or mom's family line. And the relationship you have with grandma is a gift to you, right? That if you didn't have that relationship with her, she wouldn't be giving you money. Money that you earned because you have it because I'm taking care of your needs. I'm feeding you and clothing you and giving you a place to sleep and gas for the lawnmower. You can talk about how you made money mowing lawns, but it was with my mower, my gas. I drove you there, I picked you up, and I made sure that all your other bills were paid so that you could put that $9 in your pocket, right? So everything we have comes from God's outstretched hands. I have a job. I work a lot of hours at it, right? But God gave me all of the gifts that make it possible for me to earn money here. God gave me my mental abilities. God gave me my teachers. God let me be born in a country that was at peace so that I'm not out scrapping every second of every day trying to feed myself and my family. Right? God gave me into the care of you and your families for these last 27 years who have been supporting me and caring for me. Is it my money? Yeah. Did I earn it? Well, yeah. But it also came from God's hands, every bit of it. And it's truer to say that it's God's money than it is to say that it's my money. Okay? The next 4 words of the phrase that pays: all about a glorious. All about a glorious. Now you can put a comma after glorious if you want. That's not in our word count. I don't correct punctuation. But now we're up to 12 words. And again, these last 4 words. All about a glorious. Okay. So all of this stuff that we've been talking about reminds us of the identity and the nature and the ways of the true God. That again, the more you think about this, the more it'll help you vector in on who the real God is, and the more it'll help you vector away from whatever fake God is in your head. And I'm not insulting you, you understand, right? This is all of us. We are all stupid, right? The old words of the confession, we are all in bondage to sin and cannot free ourselves. And that if we don't think every day about who the real God is, pretty soon an imaginary God tries to push the real God off the throne in our hearts, and we wind up praying to a God that doesn't exist, right? A God who is fearsome or angry or mean, or who delights in suffering. None of that is true. A God that has to be convinced to care for us, a God that has to be talked into blessing us. Well, that's not true. And if you're praying to that God, you're praying to a nothing, right? You should just go pray to a cloud. See what happens, right? It's just vapor. There's nothing there, right? A cloud has water particles, zipping around in it. This God that you're creating, it has your imagination holding it together. Just knock it off and spend time in the Lord's Prayer, because it helps you remember who the real God is, and it keeps you connected to the real God, okay? The more that we think about this, the more that we connect ourselves to the real God, the more that we remember that everything we have comes from God's hands, the more we're aware of all that God has given and continues to give, the more that we're aware that it has nothing to do with me being a special person or you being a special person, that this is about God being a special God, right? The more we keep that in our heads, the more humble it makes us. Right? So we look to God to receive what we need. and then we honor God as we receive it. So we don't talk so much about, how I'm a self-made man, or, you're a woman who accomplished anything she set her mind to. Let the world talk like that. You and me, we honor God. That as we have something, we give God the credit and the glory. We thank God for God's blessings and God's gifts, and we live in a state of humility, right? We're not stupid. We understand that God didn't throw the food into the nest, that we had to go out and get it, right? We understand that if you work harder in general, you have greater returns than someone who works less hard. We're dumb, but we're not stupid. And so here we're not at all attacking work ethic. Quite the contrary. That if you have the opportunity to be God's hands and God's voice, to bring daily bread to the people around you, it should make you work harder, right? Because now your life means something. You're not just, a group of cells, parading through the world for 70 or 80 years and then you drop dead and turn back into dirt, right? That you are a child of the living God. You've been touched by God, filled with the Spirit of God, and your life can matter. That you can do things that have eternal value, and you can live your life knowing that you are doing the will of God and honoring the God who created you and who blessed you. That's a totally different way to live. And suddenly now you're not, worried that the neighbor has more money than you, or, that your cousin has a nicer car than you, right? You are aware that you have what you have from God, and that God is calling you to work. God is calling you to serve, and that God's hand is on your life in a way that makes cars not matter. It's just a way to get from A to B. It's not a reflection of who you are or whether you're successful or not. So getting our head around this petition, living in this petition, keeps us humble. It leads us into gratitude and thanksgiving, right? So just try to list all the things that are necessary for life. I mean, Luther lists, 25 things there, right? But there are hundreds of things that are necessary for your life, and hundreds more that make your life easier and more fruitful. And just try to list them all. You will be shocked how much you have received. You haven't thought about it. Most of us spend so much time thinking about what we don't have that we don't think about what we do have. Right? There's old wisdom, that if you can't sleep at night, right, don't count sheep. Count your blessings. Just lay in bed at night and count your blessings. That you're warm on a cold day, that you get to go to school instead of going to work, that you have teachers that have chosen to pour out the best years of their lives and the strength of their bodies and their intellect to try to give you a helping hand up so that you can chase your future, right? Your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, even the ones that bug you, enrich your life, and someday will be dear friends to you, probably, right? Not always, but probably, right? So just try to list all the things. Count your blessings. Try to list all the additional blessings that God continues to pour out on you. And then if you try to get your head around each one of those, it's a gift from the God who loves you. It's gonna blow the cogs of your head, just right out of your skull. To pay attention to all that you've received and to think intentionally that it all comes from a God who cares for you and who loves you is life-changing. Right? So this little thing, give us today our daily bread. It doesn't look like much at all, but it can be something that you think about and ponder and glory in and celebrate for the rest of your life, all the blessings that you've received. And you will be a better person for it, right? Nobody is drawn to someone who just whines about what they don't have, especially when that person is as rich as a king. And you and I are richer than kings and queens. We have everything we need and more. And it all comes from God's hands, right? So gratitude and thanksgiving. right? The next 3 words of the phrase that pays, which will take us to 15 total: uproarious, comma, absurd generosity. Uproarious, comma, absurd generosity. And you can stick a period back there, right? Or at the end of that thought. Okay? Now, if you spend your time in your life growing in humility and gratitude and thanksgiving, it changes who you are. It completely alters who you are. It changes every relationship. It changes every opportunity. It changes every struggle that you're in, right? It gives you perspective and distance that the world is dying to have. And the shorthand for what you'll have if you're humble and grateful and thankful, right, is that you'll be a person who's content. And correct me if I'm wrong, there are almost none of them around, right? We live in a world, in a culture, in a society in which enough is never enough. That you always want more. You want a bigger house. You want a more expensive car. You don't just need a handbag, you need a $5,000 handbag, right? And boys may think I'm kidding about that, right? There are $5,000 handbags out there in the world, right? You don't just need shoes, you need $1,000 shoes. You don't need a suit, you need, a $5,000 silk suit. That always this word that you need more, right? A little house in which you're happy and content, that's not good enough, right? You need a mansion. And you turn on these shows on TV, the housing shows, nobody is happy with a sweet little house in the country, right? No one wants that. They want 5,000 square feet of luxury, right? That there's no one who's content. We're pushed by advertising and by the culture to buy stuff that we don't really want, to impress people that we don't really like. Why do you need that house? Well, because I've made it financially. Yeah, but you understand how much work it's going to be to keep up that house, right? You get a house and 4 or 5 outbuildings and some land and some forest. Right? You're going to be the servant of all of that. Now, if you want to be a forester and you want to be the servant of forest land, that's an honorable occupation. But if you're thinking that the purpose of buying a house and land is so that you can feel content, baby, the work is just going to drown you. You're going to work at that every day, right? It's not going to bring you contentment, right? The contentment comes from somewhere else. Now, you can be content in a 5,000 square foot house, on hundreds of acres of beautiful wooded land. You can. But that's not what makes you content. Right? What makes you content is growing in humility and in gratitude and in thanksgiving. Right? So all day, every day, you're fed this lie that what you have isn't enough, that you need more, you need better, you need finer, you need richer. Right? It's ridiculous. Right? That right now, it would do you a world of good to imagine, instead of that you need more or better, to dwell in that everything you have comes from God, and that God is committing to meeting the needs of God's creatures, even the tiny ones, even the wicked ones, and that's the God that you want to work for and with in this world. The last 3 words of the phrase that pays: N-T, right. So N is in Nancy, T is in Tom, Right is spelled W-R-I-G-H-T. Again, this is a trusted teacher that you should be finding on YouTube and watching his stuff, reading his books. His Bible commentaries are exceptional. They're just wondrous. And they cost about $6 or $7 each. They're nothing. Okay? You want me to buy you a book by N.T. Wright? I'll buy you a book by N.T. Wright. You just let me know. Okay? So we're going to be humble, we're going to be grateful, we're going to be thankful, we're going to be content. And if you've got those things going on in your life, you're going to grow in generosity, right? And that means you're going to be more like God, who just pours out blessings, who doesn't count the cost, who just gives, right? And you and I have it in our hands to be more like God, to be content and generous people, where we just care for the people around us, not to make a show, not so that people will speak well of us, not to do any sort of social reclamation project, but because that's who we've become, right? If you want to be a world-class sprinter, right, there's things that you do, right? You train, you eat right, you sleep right, you practice, you have a coach that you trust, and you do what your coach says, right? If you want to be in some ways like God, if you want to reflect the character of God and be kind and gracious and generous, this is your path. That you become aware of all the blessings you've received and you grow in gratitude for them, that you practice humility and gratitude and thanksgiving, you live into contentment, and you become generous. You become a reflection of God in God's world, right? You understand that once that transformation has taken place in you, you're not worried about heaven or hell. You're not worried, what happens if I die? Do I go to hell? Right? You've become a reflection of God. Where do you think you're going to wind up if you're living as a reflection of God? There's no fear in it at all anymore. You have the opportunity to reflect God's will and God's purposes and God's character in the world, which casts out fear, which makes you whole, which brings you peace, which fills you with love. It's a huge idea in just a few words, right? And this is why, Luther says that we should focus on the small catechism our whole lives long. This is why your grandparents and great-grandparents memorized the thing, so that these words would always be close to their hearts and in the front of their minds. All right, so that's it for this lesson. Do your homework, do it carefully, do it well. Some of you are asking, 3 questions that are good questions that you wonder about the faith. That's fine, but not at the expense of questions about the lesson. So if you want to have 27 questions on the back of your page that you're wondering about, great. If you want to ask some of them in confirmation, you know that I'm easy to follow you down the path. And there are confirmands that set up appointments with me to go through their 27 questions. And I think that's just awesome. So, if you have 27 questions and we don't get to your questions in class, text me, call me, email me, and let's get together. And, we'll spend an hour and a half or 2, right? And then we'll go through your questions, and then you can start a new list. All right? I'm here for you, your parents, in great love for you. Your grandparents, in great love for you, have paid my salary and brought me here and set aside the time and given me the resources so that we can have these conversations. You are so blessed, not because I'm so special, but because your parents and your grandparents love you so very much. You take care of yourself. I will see you on Wednesday, the 31st, God willing. Remember, our lives are always in God's hands. Bye-bye.